Hello and welcome to Pokemon Lair. Today we'll be unboxing a box of cards that I sent to Professional Sports Authority, or PSA, and I just got them back. These are 10 Pokemon cards that have been gone for over a year. Let's open them up and see what we got. Our grading review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Misty's Golduck, a Holo First Edition, the number 12 card. Looking at the front surface of this card, you can see that the Holo has no scratches or damage. And looking at our centering from top to bottom and side to side, you can see that it looks really good. Looking at our corners and edges, you can see that there's no damage on them. Looking at the reverse side, you can see that the surface looks really good. Our centering is off a little bit to the left. And going to our corners and edges, there's a little bit of damage on the two top corners. And that's going to give us a grade of 9. That's pretty darn good. Our grading review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Blaine's Dodrio, the number 32 card. This one's a first edition. Looking at the surface of the card, you can see that there's no bends or damage to the front of the card. Looking at our centering looks good from the top to bottom and our side to side. Looking at our corners and edges, I don't see any damage on them. They look pretty clean. Moving to the back, you're looking for the same stuff. Our surface looks really good. Looking at our centering doesn't look too bad from right to left or top to bottom. Looking at our corners, though, we have a couple corners that have some slight damage or fraying. And that's going to reward us with a grade of 9. Not too bad. Wish they all could be 9s. Our grading review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Rockets Mewtwo, a Holo First Edition, the number 14 card. Looking at the front surface of this card, you can see that there's no damage or scratches. Looking at our centering looks pretty darn good from top to bottom and side to side. And finally, looking at our edges and corners, I don't see any damage on them. Looking at the back, we're looking at the surface, and I don't see any damage on this card. Looking at our centering looks pretty good from right to left and bottom and to top. And looking at our corners, there is some slight damage on the lower left corner. And that's going to reward us with a 9. Nice. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Our grading review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Brock's Graveler, a first edition number 34 card. Looking at the surface of this card, I don't see any damage to it like creases or bends. And looking at our centering of the card, the centering looks good from top to bottom and side to side. And finally, looking at our corners and edges, I don't see any damage on them. They look pretty good. And turning to the back, you can see that the card looks really good on the surface. Looking at our centering doesn't look too bad from right to left or top to bottom. Looking at all our corners and our edges, you can see that there's some slight damage on 3 of the 4 corners. Taking that all into account, that's going to give us a grade of 9. I like it. That's pretty good. Our grade review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Sabrina's Alakazam, a Holo First Edition, the number 16 card. Looking at the front surface of this card, you can see the Holo has no scratches and there's no damage to the rest of the surface of the card. Looking at our centering from top to bottom looks pretty good from left to right. It looks a little centered towards the right. And looking at our corners and edges, they look pretty clean with no damage. Looking at the back, the surface looks really good. Looking at our centering, you can see that it's centered to the left. And finally, looking at our corners and edges, it looks pretty good. Maybe a little damage to the upper right. And with the centering issues, we get a grade of 9. That's pretty good. Our grade review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Brock's Sandslash, a first edition number 36 card. Look at the front surface of the card. You don't see any major creases or scratches or anything wrong with the surface of this card. Looking at our centering, it looks pretty good from from top to bottom and side to side. And finally, looking at our corners and edges, they look pretty good. Moving to the back, you can see that the surface looks really good. There's no bends or creases. Looking at our centering looks pretty good from top to bottom and side to side. And looking at our corners and our edges, if you look, the lower right has slight damage and fraying. That's going to give us a grade of Mint 9. That's pretty good. I like it a lot. Our grading review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Giovanni Trainer, a Holo First Edition, the number 16 card. Looking at the front surface of the card, you can see that there's no scratches on the Holo. It looks really good on the surface. Looking at the centering of the card, it looks good from side to side and top to bottom. Our corners and edges look really clean, and there's no damage there. Checking the back, you can see that the surface looks really good. There's a little bit of off centering to the left. Looking at our edges and corners, you can see that the edges look really good, but there is some slight damage or fraying on the upper left corner. And that'll give us a grade of Mint 9 still. That's pretty darn good. Our grade review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Erica's Bellsprout, a first edition number 38 card. Looking at the front of this card, you can see there's no bends or damage to the front of the card. There's centering on the card, looks pretty good from top to bottom and right to left. And finally, looking at our corners and edges, you can see that there's no damage on the corners or edges. Come on. Looking at the back, you can see that the surface looks pretty good from looking at the back, you can see that the surface looks pretty good. There's no damage or bends. Looking at our centering, the centering looks a little off to the top. Looking at our corners and edges, you can see that there's a little bit of fraying or damage on the upper left corner. And that's going to give us a grade of Mint 9. That's still pretty good. Our grade review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Sabrina Trainer, a Holo First Edition, the number 20 card. Looking at the front surface of this card, there's no scratches or damage to the holographics or any other part of the front. Looking at our centering from side to side is pretty good. Looking at it from top to bottom, it is a little towards the bottom. Looking at our corners and edges, they look really clean, no damage there. Moving on to the back, you can see that the surface looks really good, no bends or scratches. Looking at the centering, it is towards the left and towards the bottom. Looking at our corners and edges, though, they look really clean. I did not see any damage on them. And with all that, it's going to give us a grade of Mint 9. Pretty good for that Holo Sabrina. Our grade review of a 2000 Pokemon Gym Challenge Erica's Clefairy, a first edition number 40 card. Looking at the front surface of this card, there's no bends or damage to the front of this card. It looks really nice. Looking at the centering looks really good from top to bottom and side to side. And finally, looking at our corners and edges, you can see that those are really nice and clean. They don't have any fraying on them. Moving on to the back, you can see that the surface looks really good, no bends or damage. You can look at the centering, and the centering looks really good from right to left and top to bottom. Finally, moving on to our edges and our corners, there is a slight damage or fraying on the upper right corner. And that's going to give us Erica's Clefairy's grade of a Mint 9. Not too bad for a 20-year-old card.